I've got to say it's great to be part of this discussion. It's really, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Gubbi Gubbi and Cubbi Cubbi, and it's been my great pleasure and honour to have worked with them for the last 25 years here, and particularly the cultural burning of the last 5 years has been the most exciting opportunity to really get to the core of their cultures and as Ross was saying, just how fire is everything. Fire is culture. Fire is looking after country. It's fabulous that all of Australia is starting to realise that. And the other magnificent thing working with is the restoration of the shellfish beds along Palmerston and Moreton Bay, and to see the importance of the cultural heritage there. They're two particularly exciting, inspirational things that are happening in our region that have got traditional owners right at the core of that work and that exploration. So the Southeast Queensland catchments, as Ian so beautifully spoke about, the bioregion, we're part of the whole volcanic eruption from Wollumben that really affected from Coffs Harbour through to Gladstone. And here we are in the middle of it, the magnificent richness of ecosystems and biodiversity that we have here in Southeast Queensland, the Macleay-McPherson overlap, which is a whole amazing combination of the northernmost limits of some species and the southernmost limits of some species. And this is not just terrestrial, this is marine as well. And what it has created, this magnificent diversity of plants and animals and catchment forms with that complex geology underlying it. There's so much at stake, and the fact that so many people want to come and live here. We're juggling a lot of values. The catchments, as Ian said, it's a magnificent way of looking at our jurisdiction. We share so much in a catchment, and the water quality that comes out of that catchment is the product of all of our land management within that catchment. And it's great that the last 20 years has been a great dawning of integrated catchment management, even though our local governments don't reflect those boundaries. We have a lot of people working together within those catchments. So it has been a great story over the last 2 decades of some really great work, and I'll report on some of that, but a long way to go yet. So Healthy Land and Water, the organisation that I'm with, is a combination of SEQ catchments and healthy waterways, and we go from Noosa to south to the border and west to Toowoomba. And we don't take in the Mary, that's part of the Burnett-Mary Regional Group. So I will be speaking about the Mary River today, but mostly I'll be, in terms of the report card, I'll be talking about the Sunshine Coast rivers that are within our area. So the rivers of the Sunshine Coast are the most magnificent mixture of personalities, if you like, because the geology is so different, and we have about 5,000 kilometres of waterways and so many different landforms, land types within that. So we have 6 river systems on the Sunshine Coast, and many of the folk I know, as I go through the list of who's here online, I can see that you're all great custodians of these catchments. So there's a lot of information within our audience here today about each of these catchments, but I'll run through them quickly. The Mary River is the first one, of course, being the longest, and that's not, so that is the most river. This brown area here is just the area of the Mary that is within the Sunshine Coast Regional Council, but of course it's a very long river that comes out at Maryborough in the Great Sandy Straits, and renowned for its unique wildlife. There we have the magnificent turtle, the Mary River turtle. We of course have the Mary River cod and the lungfish. It's a magnificent body of water. Now, there is really great information available on the state government's wetlands information, wetland info website. They've done map journals, story maps of each of the rivers in Queensland. And there's a link at the top here where you can go into a fabulous 11-minute journey through the Mary River. And this is for each of these rivers, this is available. And it takes you through the groundwater dependent ecosystems, how the water moves through the landscapes, how the underlying geology affects all the vegetation and the water quality. Really great story that Mike Ronan from the Wetlands Unit has been taking this process called Walking the Landscape and taking people on this journey with us. So the Mary has a great map journal there to explore. Then we have the Noosa River, and you know, coming down from the Kalula National Park, of course, it's just got so much vegetation in its catchment that it is the jewel in the crown as far as water quality is concerned in our region. Magnificent water quality, usually, as we talk about later, in the A's for our report card. And there's only 8 metres difference from the top of the catchment to where it comes out the mouth at Noosa. So it's not a high energy system. It's lots of wetlands, lots of shallow lakes, and quite a lot of agriculture in the Kin area, which is the greatest source of sediment in the Noosa River. Again, a terrific map journal available on the Wetlands Info site. And then to the Maritchi River, totally different character, a short, flashy catchment down to the coast. Lots of different tributaries coming out of the Blackall Range and flowing east. Initially, the Maritchi River ran out north of Mount Coolum, and Petrie and Painter and Udlow came out at Maroochydore, where it is now. But in the Pleistocene period, the Mount Coolum rose up, and the northern tributaries cut their way south and picked up the other tributaries, and now they all come out at Maroochydore. And as we know, probably, that this is the last untrained river mouth between Burham Heads and Sydney. It is allowed to meander either side of Pincushion, which is a great cause of vexation for some, but a great cause of wonder and ecological delight for others. It's a magnificent estuary with its islands that and an incredible amount of sandbars that provides habitat for the shorebirds, but unfortunately it's also provides a lot of habitat for dogs, and so there's some pretty interesting aspects there. But recently the big replacement of the sand groins here, that the council wanted to replace them with rocks, that brought out the most incredible amount of interest within the community right across the whole of the Sunshine Coast region, got involved with the mouth of the Maritchi. So we're all a lot wiser now, and council's a lot wiser as to how to conduct proper community consultation on such important issues. The floodplains of the Maritchi River are really being developed rapidly, and they're such an important area of pondage. There's been 1,000 hectares under canelands in the past, but when the sugar mill closed in 2003, that's of course up for grabs now. 7,000 hectares of that cane land is only good for a certain number of crops like cane or maybe bamboo or some other crops on the acid sulfate soils. It doesn't grow a lot, but we certainly don't want it to be growing houses, because that loses the flood pondage. That'll impact a lot of the existing developments downstream, as well as taking out a lot of the ecological values. So Next we have, going south, the Malula River. Again, a short, flashy catchment, comes down from the Blackall Range. Now, the Malula is really known for some magnificent wetlands, but in the headwaters, you may or may not know, where the Blackall Range, where the basalt and the sandstone meet, the colluvium that covers that area is really slipping badly. There's many, many hectares of land that's moving down into the headwaters of the Malula. To some extent, this is happening in the Maroochy and the Stanley, but most markedly in the Malula River, and impacting the gallery rainforests and shallowing the streams and causing a lot of turbidity. So that's a major process that's going on in the Malula. And that goes back to the dairy industry on that plateau that was allowed to take all the trees out. It's a problem of the groundwater not, just continually lubricating that area and causing the mass movement of land. So now we have the Pumicestone Passage, the magnificent Pumicestone Passage. As Ian mentioned, this is the Ramsar wetland, northern part of the Ramsar wetland of, a northern part of the Moreton Bay Ramsar wetland, which is internationally recognised, and magnificently iconic plugs, volcanic plugs there with the really rich volcanic soils and an enormous amount of agricultural production. Now, the beautiful salt marsh, I just love Samphire. There's just an enormous amount of wetland and salt marsh in the Pumicestone, and there was once meters and meters deep of shellfish, of diversity of shellfish, both intertidally and subtidally, right throughout the Pumicestone and Moreton Bay and Noosa, Maroochy, and to some extent Malula rivers, all had this rich bounty of shellfish, which through dredging and very heavy harvesting and then mudworm caused by sedimentation, within 50 years, that was all taken out. So come 1920, it's functionally extinct ecosystem now as far as shellfish are concerned. But as I say, there's some good stories there. We're not going to go into the restoration now, but the current status is that it's functionally extinct. And then across to the west to the Stanley River, which is a tributary of the magnificent Brisbane River. Now, the Mary and the Brisbane rivers are two of 7 long rivers within our broad bioregion. And I think they've tried to get some specific designation for these long rivers, but that hasn't happened yet. But they really are standouts, very similar land types that they share. The Stanley is a magnificent body. It's pretty well vegetated and comes down through a lot of agricultural land and then through the Somerset Dam to reach the Brisbane River. Now, Healthy Land and Water puts together the Natural Resource Atlas, and in about a month's time, this will be available online, updated, ready for the review of the Southeast Queensland Natural Resource Management Plan. So I can't say at this stage that it's available, but certainly it will be soon. That's just a screenshot of what it will be like. And you can go through and explore many of the different data sets that are available. There's a whole range of data sets, things like all the usuals, waterways, bushlands, but also things like climate regulation data sets, and lots of different ways of looking at the landscape and treating the different, the many data layers together. The report card that Healthy Land and Water now puts out, and we're just coming into our 20th year of this report card. So it was previously Healthy Waterways. So it's amazing to have such a comprehensive monitoring program that covers such a length of time. It covers 311 freshwater, estuarine and marine monitoring sites throughout the region. And it presents this data each year in A to F health grades. And most recently, it's added a social and economic star rating, 1 to 5 star rating. So the on the website, on the report card website, the link is up the top there. You can click on any of these different catchments and get up exactly, explore each of the story maps for those catchments. So we'll just go through those 6 catchments that I spoke about. We've got Noosa here, which in 2019 was an A-. Now, Noosa, as I say, is pretty excellent. It's the cream of the catchments and water quality in the region, and it remains so. We've got the estimate of 268 to 233 kilograms per hectare of sediment moving through the system. And the health of the freshwater creeks improved in 2019. That was largely to do with the fish community health at Sandy Creek. And then amalgamated, the score was better. And the stream bank vegetation wetland extent remains excellent. The water quality of the estuary improved and remains in excellent condition. There is some interesting nitrogen results in the middle in Lake Koroga, but generally pretty high quality, and a 5-star rating, which reflects how much the community value their really high value waterway. Moving down, then we've got Maroochy, which in this last year was a B-, and it remains in a good condition, but the pollutant loads certainly increased from very high to extremely high, to 612 to 687 kilograms per hectare. So that was, even though rainfall was lower, there was significant rainfall event earlier in the year, which probably caused these really high loads. So the report card goes up and down depending on the amount of rain. And it's terribly important that, that we build the resilience into the system so that we can cope with those high rain events, which are only going to increase with climate change. So making sure we have the ground cover and the riparian covers, and that all the measures are in place with construction and whenever the soil is opened up. So when the rains come, we can't just say, oh, well, we had a really heavy rainfall that year. We've got to cope with that. So the system has to be able to deal with it. In Maroochy, the health of the freshwater creeks improved to excellent, and the extent of freshwater wetlands remained poor. This is a continuing story in Maroochy. We have ignored our wetlands. The whole groundwater dependency of the Maroochy catchment has been entirely ignored. And it's this attitude, out of sight, out of mind. The aquifers are quite complex, and because they're hard to map and expensive to map, people just think they don't matter. But there's so much interaction that goes on between the surface and groundwater that has a lot of bearing on the water quality. Their waterway benefit rating was 4-star. Malula was C+ and remains in a fair condition. Pollutant loads very high, and this is probably a lot to do with what I spoke before about this mass movement of land in the headwaters. The freshwater creeks are fair to good. The wetland extent, again, very poor. Similar situation to Maroochy, where the groundwater has just been ignored. And we've got a 4-star rating there. So the community still values quite a bit. The Pumicestone catchment last year had an A-, which was excellent. So it went up from a good to excellent. So that's a great sign. Having said that, there is one catchment, sub-catchment in Pumicestone, the Coochin Creek, which has the highest level of some farm pesticides, bromacil and diuron of all of Queensland. So there's a lot of focus on the agriculture, particularly the pineapples that goes there. Some of that's historic. Certainly the high nitrogen levels coming out of Coochin Creek, coming out of the groundwater, quite historic. But it seems like the Diaron and the Bromosil are quite, they're covered with, they're carried with the surface siltation. So that's...
Excuse me, Susie, I really hate to interrupt, but we've just passed 21 minutes since you started. And that's actually counting the 5 minutes it took to get the slides going. So I wonder if you might be able to wrap up, or the other thing that I'm thinking is we can also capture some of these other slides at the end of today if you've got the mental energy. I'm just aware that I'd like to try to stay along some rough guideline for the program, if that's okay.
It's fine, Michelle, I'll be pretty quick then. So, and the Stanley was a B-, still remains in good condition. So I wanted to finish up by talking about the most extraordinary stewardship that goes on to the point where in 2011, the Sunshine Coast Rivers Initiative won the National River Prize. This is an extraordinary focus from all the different groups, and many of you represented here today, that really is worth a mention. I know we're not talking about people today, Michelle, but really have to shout out to these many groups that work tirelessly and have done so for decades to really know their catchments, to understand the characteristics of the catchments and help others to know. There's an enormous amount of work there, and it's great to see people like Kerry Jones really stepping up and playing such a leading role in the catchment management. There's Kerry's dad, AJ, up there planting mangroves down at Pumstone. So an enormous amount of work that goes on across the private land ownership. I know Susie Duncan's online today. All of that work that you do, Susie, with connecting through private land ownership, very important, as well as the all the public land reserve management that goes on. There we are, Michelle, and as I say, I'll send you those links through later.